So I think we'll go ahead and get started. Welcome, everybody. I'm Tim May. I'm the host of the AI Meetup. And what we're going to do today is talk about prompt engineering. My background, I'm a fractional CTO architect, mostly retired, but still working 60 hours a week. How does that make sense? I don't know. My wife says, you're the only guy I know who retires so they can. It's because I want to work on the stuff I want to work on, right? So I've been in this for 40 years. I've had lots of products and areas in fintech and enterprise resource planning and investing and dev tools. So I've covered a lot of different areas. I've done a lot with AI, and especially in investing. We also did a lot of machine learning in that. So we were hacking the stock market with AI, which is always fun. I've got a few software patents. And what I do now as a focus is help startups, really establish a solid technical basis for their business so that as they get larger, they don't have to back up and redo. It's not necessary to slap things together. You can actually start right and continue on. The days of slapping things together, because that's all you can afford to do, are gone. So if you want to join me on LinkedIn, you can grab my QR code here. This will also be on the video. By the way, this is being recorded. And if anybody has a question, I'm going to ask Josh to hand him the microphone so we can get your question in the video. So we're going to talk about today is prompt engineering. I've done a talk on prompt engineering before, but then I've had lots of people over the last 6 months or so, ask me, what is prompt engineering? And I wanted to revisit it in a slightly different way than I had done previously. So what we're going to start with is an example, right? Let's say, what kind of thing would I need prompt engineering to accomplish? So we have Sarah. She works in a company, and she wants to ask the system, the corporate system, to retrieve her current marketing plan and create a summary and then email it to me and my team. Pretty simple request. It's the kind of request you'd make to somebody that was your personal assistant, right? It'd be pretty easy. But that's actually a challenge, and we're going to talk about what that involves. So the first thing is we have a step where she sends the prompt in, and your host, the system, is going to say, well, we need to plan how we're going to do this. So it's going to make a request to the LLM with the context of the job. What kinds of resources are available to use, and some other interesting pieces. All of the things that you as an assistant would know you had at hand. How to look up somebody in the HR department to find out who her subordinates are, that kind of thing. Send it off to the LLM. The LLM would come back with a series of steps. So that's using the LLM to actually plan out a series of steps. Recent advances in AI and chain of thought have made this a really much more powerful utility than it used to be. And so I listed some of the steps down below. Now we're going to look at those in sort of one at a time. First is we're going to retrieve a document. Well, she wanted to summarize her marketing plan, right? So that means that the host needs to know how to go and find that document. Well, that's a native function. You don't need an LLM for that. You just need to know how to find a document. So we go and get that document. Then we send that document to the LLM saying, please summarize this. So when you talk about LLM capabilities, you have chat, you have text completion and summarization. Those are common capabilities. Some LLMs are better at one or more of those things than others. So you could send it to different LLMs. And summarization comes back, gives you a nice succinct summary. Okay, you've got that step done. Next, what we need to do is we need to go to the HR system. We need to find out who Sarah's team is. So that's another native function. Okay, we don't need an LLM for that. And the next thing we would do is we're going to call the email system to send an email out to each of those team members, including Sarah. Right. So again, that's a native function. We probably don't need an LLM for that. And finally, we want to respond to the original prompt saying, hey, sir, I've done the job. I've sent, here's your copy, and by the way, I've sent emails to everybody. All right, so that was a number of series of steps, and I want you to really focus on in these steps in that there's a lot going on here, not just a call to an LLM. And that's the key component of prompt engineering, non-trivial prompt engineering, and that is where you need to combine the calls to the LLM with other calls to different parts of your system to accomplish a task. Yes, Josh.
Do you have examples of what like a host would be? Like I'm using just like a server in the framework you're talking about, but like
sure,
what could some of those be?
A great example of a host would be you use.
I just use a web server. I run a LAMP stack, so we
Right.
just
So
park it
your
all
LAMP
there.
stack is your host, and there are a variety of tools that you can use that your PHP code can make calls to do all of the things we've talked about. There are whole toolkits around that for that platform. If you're using a stack like the ASP.NET stack from Microsoft, you've got a whole bunch of tools. If you're hosting your server on a cloud platform like AWS or on Google Compute or on Azure, again, there's a whole bunch of different tools you can use. We're going to go through a list of some of the tools, not go too deep. But the idea is that almost any kind of server that you're running your corporate system on will have these kinds of tools available to it. So you integrate in through SDKs, libraries, into your server software, and then you use these tools to actually kind of hook up all the pieces together, right? And next is let's talk about prompt engineering. What is it? It's augmentation. So what are we augmenting? We're augmenting the context. That is what you're sending to the LLM for it to give you a response, right? So the idea is that if you start a conversation yourself with an LLM and all you're doing is sitting down starting a chat, then you often give it a few pieces of information to get it to focus on your particular, say, okay, I have a programming language question, I'm working in C#, I'm working with these libraries, and here's my question. Give me an example of a solution. It's not going to give you a PHP example, it's going to give you one in C# because you set the context, right? So you can have very substantial context with lots of information. And the advances in AI recently in the size of the context window allow you to provide an enormous amount of information to the LLM so it can do a really good job of giving you a very specific response that's focused on your specific needs. So part of prompt engineering is to prepare and send along with your calls to the LLM enough context that it can give you an answer that makes sense. You can also do fine-tuning. We were talking about that earlier, right? Fine-tuning where you've trained the LLM so it's got the main LLM and then it's got an adjacent model that's only yours, and it's been trained on your data so it can do one more level of inference to make the responses that it gives into any prompt very specific to your documents. You may have trained on a bunch of, say, HR manuals. So if you have somebody in your company that wants to ask an HR question, it'll not just get the general, broad HR response, but actually it can reference your HR manuals and give you a response specific to that. This could be true of almost anything. Yes?
So I can go on YouTube and find out.
Hold up, hey.
So I'll just go on YouTube and get the instructions of how to set that up for myself because I'm
We're
working
going to
doing
talk about that in
documentaries.
just a minute. Yeah, I'm glad you asked that question. Okay. Because part of what we're going to do is talk about the tools that you might use to do some of these things. So we talked about native functions in the example, right? That's the other thing where we're calling the HR system, we're calling the document store system, all these things, calling the email system. You can think of all the different services that are available in a corporate system. Even a small business has a lot of these. Often they're provided by some service provider, but you still want to call them, right? So the other thing we do with augmentation on setting a context is prompt grooming. No, we don't get a brush out. What we're doing is we're improving it so that it's more effective. So you might take a prompt, not as a prompt, but you might have a form that somebody fills in on your website. Here are my interests, and they have drop downs to let them pick certain kinds of things that they're interested in. Maybe pick one or more of these, that kind of thing. So when it comes in, it's a structured piece of data. It's not an actual prompt. You can turn that into a very effective prompt using sort of a template where you plug in the values they provided, as replacement targets, and then you send it off to the LLM. So you can actually take questionnaires and other forms of structured data you're collecting on a website, create a prompt and send that off to the LLM and get back responses that are generally better because you've gone to that extra effort. So finally, next is the response. When we get a response back from the LLM, sometimes we can just send it right back to user, fine. But we can also improve it. We can augment it. We can do RAG. We can do a search for other things that should go along with it. Maybe a list of websites to visit, whatever. So at the end of the day, you can add things to prompts of various kinds. And you can use non-LLM functionality to create those attachments and whatnot. So you don't always have to use an LLM for everything because LLMs can be very expensive. So one of the things prompt engineering allows you to do is enhance the prompt that gets submitted and augment the response. So both the request and the response can be augmented. And you can usually do that less expensively than making repeated calls to an LLM. So this can save you money.
Well, it also helps with drift and hallucinations the more context you give it.
Absolutely.
So this way it doesn't wander around as much and it doesn't lose track of where it is.
Yeah, there's a technology called attention vectors that were introduced that have allowed us to, I like that, allow us to increase the size of a context window without the AAM starting to hallucinate. That was one of the reasons context windows used to be so small, is if you gave them too much data, they would hallucinate. They couldn't stay focused on the conversation. So attention vectors have allowed us to not only process larger context windows, but avoid hallucination in general. Okay. Not that they've completely solved that problem, but it's improved a lot. The other thing, remember we made the call to the LLM and it gave us a series of steps to perform? So that's a planning. LLMs can now do a good job of that, where they can go ahead and plan out a set of actions that will achieve a goal that you set. But you can also, for a lot of frequently performed actions, you could codify that so you don't have to have the LLM plan. You can just have your own set of heuristics or actual rule sets. So there's a range of ways in which you can go from a light touch in terms of just let the LLM do a lot of the stuff for you to, hey, very fine-grained control where you can, certain circumstances where you want to save money or get a specific response, you can code that up. Okay? So those are there's some other augmentation things we can do, but these are the main ones. Okay, the next thing we're going to talk about, to your point, some prompt engineering tools. We have 3 levels that I'd like to address. One is no code. Everybody here used ChatGPT, right? Hands? Yeah, pretty much everybody. Okay, how many people have used the custom GPTs in ChatGPT? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. About a third of the audience. Okay, so that's a no code example. Why is it no code? Because you don't code anything. All you're doing is going in, you say, I have a new custom GPT. Its objective is, its tone is going to be, here's a few documents to set the context, and I want you to always answer with precision, or it's okay to be a little creative, whatever. You set up the environment, right? You're making it more than, yes. Yep.
How do I find it? I've been going on.
Oh, it's in the paid version of ChatGPT.
I just started paying last week, so.
Yeah, on the top left, there's.
Top left, okay.
Yeah. Is it now? I didn't think it was. That's
Yeah, you
great.
look for custom GPT. So up at the top left, you click on like ChatGPT where you'd start a new context, and it should give you the option of selecting. That's an
No, but
important
this-
thing
this
to
is a-
ignore features.
This is a really great way for folks that don't have any interest in programming or heavy lifting to get some fairly powerful tools in place, right? I'll give you an example. Like I code in a couple of different languages and use different databases and different cloud stacks. So what I do is I have custom chat GPTs that are one for C#, one for C++, one, different languages. And then I have different ones for configuration of cloud services, one for, Azure, one for AWS and that sort of thing. So I just go to one of those when I have a question about how I want to do something. I don't have to say in the command line, set the context, it's already there. So that actually helps a lot. That could be true if you had everything from pet grooming business to legal stuff. I mean, you can make low code work for you in a lot of business contexts. In addition, with OpenAI's ChatGPTs, the custom ones can be submitted to their store. And if you build something really cool, other people could actually pay for it, or you could just, provide it free, whatever you like to do. Now, low code, whole different game. It means that you do have to have some ability to at least deal with the concepts of programming. If-then loops, conditional actions, right? Things like using making calls out to native functions. Go get the weather, go get the HR team, whatever. So at the end of the day, this is going to require a little bit more understanding on the part of the user, but no real code. It's mostly, these are usually drag and drop environments. Okay, and there's some good ones out there. And then pro code is where, okay, the gloves come off. You might even be writing your own native functions and integrating those. In other words, you're getting down into the nitty gritty. It's the same kind of stuff that we've been coding for years and years and years. But you have access in that environment to all of the sort of goodies from LLMs. You can call one or more LLMs or choose different LLMs for different tasks and do all sorts of things. Okay, so let's talk about no-code prompt engineering designed, you know, for users with little or no programming experience. We don't want to have people learn programming to use no-code. Usually the interface, the focus is on making it easy to use, not powerful. So we trade, you know, power for intuitive and easy understanding. We want very little cognitive load. We want people to be able to go in and just use it without having to hit a manual, okay? And it's really good for business users who have a quick, straightforward task. And maybe they could create those chat GPT, custom GPTs, and then share it with their colleagues. So I've seen businesses do that very successfully. So no-code examples, it's really good for automating repetitive tasks. It's also good for, you can add chatbots to websites now with low-code, where you can actually provide a service and answer product questions. So you can say, all right, I want you to eat this website, the context, and then when people have a question, I want you to be able to answer the questions and restrict it to information available on the website as much as possible. You can tell it not to be creative, you know, don't brag, just tell them the facts. And then you can also create chat bots with any kind of specific focus and knowledge base. An example of some no-code prompt engineering tools, we talked about OpenAI's ChatGPT, Claude projects. Anybody use Claude?
Been meaning to.
Claude is excellent. I've been using Claude a lot, and they have something similar to the custom GPTs. They have projects. Same deal. You go in, you create a project, you say, this is your objective, this is your tone of voice, here's a bunch of documents. And then it will allow you to ask, you know, have a chat conversation with that project. And it's a little more powerful and a whole lot better interface than ChatGPT's, you know, custom GPTs. It's just a lot easier to use. Claude 3.5 Sonnet is, in my use case anyway, at least as good, if not better, than 4.0. But 0.1, the newest, latest preview, is pretty interesting from OpenAI. Microsoft Power Visual Agents, part of their suite, and then Google Vertex. I've got to go and play with that. A few people tell me about it. I haven't played with it yet. But these are a few of the no-code where you are literally just answering questions and dropping some documents in. Then you have low-code prompt engineering. So that was no-code, now we're talking about low-code, meaning that it's not necessarily that you're going to be typing in code, but you need to understand coding concepts like, you know, loops and conditionals and whatnot. It's usually faster to use a tool like this to create moderately complex business processes. So sometimes you're pushed to using a low-code tool because you just can't get it done with no-code. It's usually a drag-and-drop environment. That's why it's not considered to be high code. So you can actually draw diagrams how everything flows. And that can make it very easy to both yourself understand what you're looking at, and also if you have colleagues and you're collaborating on building something, you can look at a diagram together and it's usually pretty quick for them to catch on to what you're trying to do, as opposed to trying to take them through code, right? And then access here, this is the other big difference. They usually have access to an extensive library of native functions that you can call. Those are not usually available to you in the no-code environments. So this is where you would make calls to the email system, send that email, or in our example, the HR, to get the, you know, list the team members for someone. You can also have a library of all sorts of functions that do clever things with prompt semantic, prompt cleanup, augmentation. Next one is popular low-code prompts. Well, Microsoft has something that's relatively new. They just had a huge release called Copilot Studio. They're proud of it. They want $200 a month for it. Ouch. But it is a true low-code platform. It's drag and drop. You get access to all of the goodies in Microsoft's infrastructure and access to all the Azure backend stuff if you happen to be running on that. I've only just started to play with it. I've used a lot of low-code tools over the years and built some myself. It's using all the usual techniques. They haven't made any serious mistakes. Yeah, there's one behind you.
But Copilot Studio should be in the Pro.
Pardon?
Should be in the third category, Pro.
Oh,
You know,
he's suggesting you've got the pro code and he thinks Copilot Studio should be there.
No, Pro Code is, I wouldn't put it in the Pro Code because Pro Code I want to be able to code. Microsoft Copilot Studio is focused on a user interface where you don't have to do any coding, which makes it a low-code environment.
You can do.
You
code.
can, but it's not its focus,
Yeah.
right?
Depends
If,
on the-
the next slide's on Pro Code. When you see what I think of as Pro Code, you'll understand the difference. So then Google Diagflow, they have a whole product there, and AWS Bedrock Studio. So these are all environments in which you're not expected to do a lot of coding to get some fairly moderately complex things done, right? We got low-code examples. Generally, they use pre-configured LLMs, right? So you're not coding up your own interface to talk to different LLMs. They might let you select from a suite of LLMs, like Azure has access now to a bunch of. AWS has always had access to a whole bunch of different ones. You can publish agents for others to use. There's usually a development, a test, and a production environment flow built into the tool. And you can create, as I said, moderately sophisticated business processes. So let's go to the next one, Pro Code. Okay, so high level of customization and control. So I define a Pro Code environment in which there are no barriers. I can do anything I need to do. In other words, with that platform, I should be able to build any level of prompt engineering required for any kind of business process. And so I also want in that environment to either build or have access to native corporate functions. And in those functions, I want to be able to use LLMs and whatnot to make them better functionality. And finally, I expect anybody using a Pro Code environment to have an extensive programming background. In other words, they don't take you by the hand and walk you through things. They expect you to have a fairly substantial background in code. So Pro Code tools, Microsoft Semantic Kernel, right? That's what Copilot Studio is built on top of, right? So this is going one more layer down where you can literally do anything you want. There are other Microsoft tools in the code. I didn't list them all. They have some great stuff in the area of agencies and agentics now, they're calling it. OpenAI Assistants. Has anybody done OpenAI Assistants?
What is that? I've been seeing that phrase a lot.
Which one?
So OpenAI Assistants, I
Okay.
was making a bunch of training data and there's an assistant value in the JSON lines files I was using.
So if you have an OpenAI account and you're basically wanting to use their API from your host. So you have your server standing up in PHP and you want to make calls to OpenAI. You can go straight to the LLM, but you can also go to their more extensive API. And behind that API, you can build assistants, which are like the ChatGPT custom GPTs on steroids.
Yeah, I think that's what I was doing, beating my head against the keyboard on Thursday.
Right.
So Thursday, it took me 6 tries to have one successful, and then it took 6 more attempts to be able to consistently have successful attempts.
So I've used OpenAI's assistants. Again, this is a Pro Code tool. They expect you to know a lot of stuff. The documentation is not aimed at a moderately, somebody that hasn't had some programming courses or at least done some pretty deep hobby stuff. I mean, you need to understand JSON files. You need to understand coding concepts, inheritance.
Well, at the edge that we're at, the documentation is sometimes going to be inaccurate, not updated with what the current thing is, or sometimes just incomplete as well.
Yeah,
it's
That's part of being a pro coder, is that those kinds of, yeah,
right.
yes,
So just in
those
case
kinds of
anyone
things
thinks
are
they
just-
want to step up to this, just be aware that you're still
I
just
would
on
rate-
your own.
I would rate the my experience of the OpenAI assistants as about an 8 out of 10. In other words, I wouldn't give them 100%, but they did a pretty good job. It's, it just varies. Yeah.
So I've been creating some images on research that I'm doing.
Sure.
If I wanted to animate that, is there something in the custom or the assistant that
You know,
would animate some of the things I've already done?
Well, we talk about foundational models, and that's basically deep neural networks that are tuned to, or they're trained to do certain things. We have ones for LLMs and we have ones for image generation. I do not know about the animation side. I know they exist. I've never played with one, but I know they exist and they're supposedly getting better. That might be fun to dive into for a talk if somebody wants to do one. You want to? Yes.
Unreal Engine.
What was that?
Unreal Engine.
Well, the Unreal Engine.
No, I'm talking about with the 3D Max and ChatGPT.
You've been using those three together? Yeah. So the Unreal Engine, I've built 3D games and 3D engineering tools, and those libraries like Open Cascade and Unreal Engine are fabulous tools.
But are you developing
Recording.
sorry. Are you developing your own characters?
I did, yeah.
Okay, and through Unreal Engine?
Yeah.
Or, okay, now did you...
Well, what you do is, I was using Blender and I also used
Yeah,
3D Max for a while,
Blender.
but you build your skeleton and you scan
Right,
it
right,
and then
right,
you
right.
export it and you import it into the engine
Okay.
along with all your scene elements, and you
Yeah.
use scripts to animate them. And what AI is being used for is to control now the actions of the non-playing characters, right?
Right.
So they're doing a lot of that now. The other thing they're doing is, physics is cool, but there's more to it than just physics in terms of why different NPCs are doing the things they do. And we've always had heuristics, rule sets. They're kind of vaguely accurate. And most people that play games have always said these NPCs are stupid, right? So they're getting less stupid. And then there's the actual development of models themselves, which I'm not an artist, so I haven't done that much of.
Well, and just to wrap that thought up, though, too, I think a lot of times folks, so there's sort of this diffusion of innovation where at the bleeding edge of everything, the people that are building those are only solving the problems that they see. And then you have some derivative technologies. And I think with the video animation and stuff, from an engineering perspective, it's a lot less interesting than the force multiplier, some of this other stuff is. But there's enough interest in it where there are a lot of small spin-off products that are very nichey that will solve almost any kind of use case now, because folks are saying, oh, well, can I plug AI into this? And so almost in every category, like if you're trying to make a this or that, another thing, you've got it there. A lot of times they're just duct tape and crazy gluing something together, but then they're making the low code,
Sure,
no
your
code
mileage
solution.
will vary, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, there's time will tell.
Well, I'm trying to bypass all those.
You're recording it.
I'm trying to bypass all the code writing.
Yeah.
So I've been doing animation since the 90s. So what I try to do is what I'm trying new is I'm buying a mocap suit, motion capture suit.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah.
With all the dots on it and you move around.
Yes, and see if I can't transfer that data into ChatGPT and
Well,
write it.
One of the things my son has been working with is there's a NVIDIA tool set.
I know about that.
Yeah, and he was playing around with wanting to capture gameplay, like Overwatch, those sorts of things, and then use AI to analyze the gameplay. And so there's a lot of interesting tools out there. He hasn't been successful yet, but he's still working on it.
I know his name.
Yes. All right, and then finally, AWS Bedrock. Bedrock is a very extensive suite of all things machine learning and AI. And AWS, Bedrock is their sort of label for all of those services. And so there's a bunch of APIs that you can call, and there's also a Bedrock Studio that you can use to do all sorts of things. You know what's surprising to me is AWS was easily the most sophisticated machine learning cloud provider. I mean, they had all of the tools that you would need to do massive machine learning of various kinds, and they didn't follow through and jump into the LLM early. They missed the boat. It's amazing when you got that much money, you still miss the boat. But they've caught up in a lot of ways. So they now offer a whole bunch of different LLMs through the Bedrock service. So you can, if you're building services in AWS, you can call like one of 6 different LLMs, each of which have different strengths. They have also, in addition to LLMs, they have foundational models that do image processing and those sorts of things. So you can make all these calls and you can orchestrate them to great advantage. So you might call a different LLM to do your conversation, your chat, a different one to do your text completion, and a different one to do your summaries, right? And image generation is yet another, they have a couple of those. And then there's Google's Dataflow CX, which I included because people told me I need to have it on here. I have not played with it. I went and looked at it briefly. It looks interesting. But like a lot of Google products, you need to play with it before you believe their marketing hype. That's true of all these guys, actually. So pro code use cases, I think we've talked about most of these. So I won't go through the list in detail, but basically when you need to take the gloves off and do something really, really deep and dark and dirty, yeah. The other side of it is you are a coder. Oftentimes people are just more comfortable diving in and doing the stuff on the back end and don't want to be sort of a situation where I can do the low code won't let me do this. So in their pro code environment, they just keep going, right? There's no blockers. So it depends a little bit on the audience who's using it as well. So the future of prompt engineering, I think that we're going to see a lot more prompt engineering enabling users to automate tasks. Okay, we're going to see more and more and more of that on every product line, including products that you as a business owner might be providing, right? So you don't have to be a Google, you don't have to be a Microsoft, you don't have to be AWS to actually give your sort of website superpowers to help your customers. Maybe you have an automotive, like O'Reilly's or somebody like that, and you want to help people map out a build on their car. They want to, pump up the volume, do something to it. It could help you get all of it knows about your car, it knows about all of the fitment options, and it could give you a whole build sheet for, adding a few hundred horsepower, something like that. So there's all kinds of different use cases out there for whatever business, whether you're selling embroidery or woodworking or whatever. No-code and low-code platforms will let you do a lot of that, but if you really want to be top of the game and you want to, sort of advance the art, you probably need a pro code environment. I think we're also going to see advances in the AI side that will allow people through a conversation actually bypass low code entirely. I don't think it's going to be very long before anything you can do in low code can be just done through a conversational interface. It might show you what it's going to do in that same interface, but you won't have to do it yourself. So we're going to see some real advances. Did you know that there's a database of 49,000, I think, it's about 49,000 business processes that have been codified. It's all available as a JSON download. There's a big repository of this. Imagine an LLM sucking all that in. Now it knows all these business processes. There are environments in which the processes can be simulated, so you can
What's
test
this
the
thing called?
I'll send you a link, Josh. And so at the end of the day, you take a resource like that, which has been around for like 20 years now, and the LLMs could be really smart about business processes, and then you could say, well, I need a process to do this, 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 and I need to tie them together. We're going to see some very interesting enterprise system and even maybe, business departmental level automation come from that. Okay. So I want to call for presenters. So
I'm working right now on a thing that's what you just, if you go back one slide, that very top one, that's a tool we're calling her Grace that's getting released before the next session.
then why don't you come and talk about it?
I would love to.
All right, let's do it.
Put it on the calendar.
So guys, I really want this not to be an ivory tower type of meetup, okay? Even if you're doing something modest, it's okay. I'd love you to get a chance to talk about it, right? So show us what you're doing. It's also a way for you to get some feedback that you might not otherwise have, right? So that's good. So all it takes is give me a call and we'll talk about it and get you on the schedule. So we've reviewed these tools. I put the slide in just so somebody's watching this online, they can go and look at the different tools. We're going to do, and the messages for the YouTube video will have links to all of sort of the entry points, the different tool overviews. And then, so I also want to open it up, like Josh just started with, what tools are you using? Are you using tools I haven't mentioned today that you really want to give a shout out to? What kinds of things are you trying to automate? What are you trying to do? Share that. And then we're going to kind of bring this to a close, and then I'd like to do a huddle where we all just sort of have a chance to talk to one another, and maybe folks that are sort of building interesting things that other people are interested in, they can kind of collaborate. So we'll do that. And so we'll come back to this just a minute. This QR code is for the AI Meetup. So I have about 270 members right now. And so what I do, prior to each Tech Alley and any other special events we might have, is I send out emails to everybody. Meetup does, and it says, "Hey, this is what the next meetup is going to be about, and here's where it's going to be, and how long it's going to be, and the time we start." So grab that if you'd like to join the Meetup group. It doesn't cost anything, and this is my own LinkedIn QR code if you want to link up with me. So let me go back to this slide. So what I want to do is end the formal presentation, and anybody that wants to talk, we can just go ahead and have a chat about all things AI. Any questions before we get to that? No, we're good? All right. Thanks, guys.